Reading about you, your journalistic beat is climate security. How do you define this term?
It's looking at the many different ways in which climate change and violence and instability interact with one another. So in other words, it can be the ways in which climate change contributes to violence, which is the sort of particular part of this ugly mosaic that I focus on. But it can also be the ways in which kind of parts of the climate and environmental space are weaponized at times of conflict as sort of methods of war. And equally, it can also look at the ways in which the environment and climate are victims of insecurity and hostilities of different natures.
In your book, towards the end a little bit, you highlight local level environmental peace building efforts. And I know I read somewhere that you understand that your book isn't necessarily all about hope, but at the end we try to address it because that's in the end what drives a lot of people is this hope. Can you share an example of a community that's found innovative ways to address climate-driven conflict?
So one of the best examples was in the African Sahel, which is simultaneously dealing with some of the worst climate-related violence, but also has produced many of the best illustrations of how environment and climate can be leveraged to reduce so many of the bouts of violence that people are up against. I came across these sort of arbitration mechanisms, these like local mediation bodies that with pretty shoestring-like budgets have managed to kind of bring together a lot of these herders and farmers who've been fighting one another with greater intensity and greater regularity across the region for reasons related to climate change in many instances, and reduced the casualty counts and in some instances prevented violence altogether.
The final chapter of your book is titled Out of Chaos, Hope? ? What gives you hope?
I think the big thing that gives me hope is the very fact that despite kind of so many circumstances and so many officials like almost willfully thrusting vulnerable peoples against one another, it's incredible to me that there's as little violence as there actually is. And that's because people will often go to the most extraordinary lengths to avoid violence, even if it appears to be the most natural and sort of most logical conclusion from those miserable circumstances that they're up against. And I guess the takeaway from that is that, yeah, if you do grant people the tools and the mechanisms to prevent violence, they will, in most instances, and with a few honorable exceptions here or there, absolutely grab for them. So despite the idea that there's just this kind of thin veneer of civilization, like separating us from a kind of Lord of the Flies style war of all against all, reality, that's not really the case.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for this interview. It was incredibly insightful. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.